In the winter of 1851, a teacher named Elizabeth Hartwell made a discovery in the basement of St. Catherine's Academy for Young Ladies that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Behind a false wall, in what appeared to be an abandoned storage room, she found 24 small beds, each with iron shackles still attached to the headboards. Beside each bed lay a single possession: a torn doll, a faded ribbon, a small wooden cross. On the wall, written in what appeared to be a child's desperate scrawl, were the words, "We are still here." The Massachusetts authorities buried Elizabeth's report so deep that it didn't surface again until 1987, when renovation workers found her original testimony sealed in a mason jar behind the Academy's altar. What they discovered about the fate of those 24 orphan girls would reveal one of New England's most carefully guarded secrets, a secret that 3 women calling themselves nuns had killed to protect. Before we continue with the story of St. Catherine's Academy, I need to tell you something important. This channel isn't for everyone, only for those brave enough to uncover the darkest secrets that history tried to bury. If you're one of the few who can handle the truth about what really happened in that Massachusetts Academy, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And I want to know, comment below and tell me what state you're listening from. Are you brave enough to hear what happened to those 24 girls? Let's find out together. But first, we need to understand how a place of supposed sanctuary became a house of horrors. The year was 1834, and Massachusetts was experiencing unprecedented growth. The Industrial Revolution had transformed cities like Boston and Worcester into bustling centers of commerce, but it had also created a darker problem: thousands of orphaned children with nowhere to go. Salem, Massachusetts in 1834 was a city still carrying the weight of its infamous past. While the witch trials were nearly a century and a half behind them, the people of Salem remained deeply religious and suspicious of anything that seemed unusual or out of place. The Congregationalist churches dominated the religious landscape, their stark white steeples reaching toward gray New England skies like accusing fingers. It was in this atmosphere of rigid puritanical devotion that St. Catherine's Academy for Young Ladies was established on Gallows Hill Road, a location that seemed almost mockingly appropriate given what would later transpire there. The Academy occupied an imposing 3-story brick building that had once served as a private mansion for a wealthy merchant family. Its Gothic Revival architecture, with tall, narrow windows and steep, gabled roofs, gave it an air of respectability that would prove to be nothing more than an elaborate facade. The Academy advertised itself as a Christian institution dedicated to the moral and educational development of orphaned young ladies, ages 12 to 17. The promotional materials, printed on expensive paper and distributed throughout New England, promised refinement in manners, excellence in domestic arts, and careful placement in respectable Christian households. Parents who had died of consumption, cholera, or industrial accidents could rest easy, knowing their daughters would be well cared for at St. Catherine's. The woman who presented herself as Mother Superior Victoria Whitman was a figure of imposing authority. Tall and severe, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun beneath her black habit, she commanded respect wherever she went in Salem. Her voice carried the cultured accent of Boston's Beacon Hill, and she spoke eloquently about her calling to serve God's most vulnerable children. She claimed to have been educated at the prestigious Mount Holyoke Female Seminary and to have served in Catholic orphanages in Ireland before coming to Massachusetts. Sister Margaret Collins appeared to be Whitman's perfect complement. younger, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that immediately put frightened orphan girls at ease. She taught literature and music, and her soft Irish accent reminded many of the girls of mothers they had lost. Children who arrived at St. Catherine's, traumatized and grieving, found in Sister Margaret a maternal figure who seemed to genuinely care about their welfare. The third member of their Holy Trinity was Sister Agnes Murphy, a stern woman in her 40s who served as the Academy's disciplinarian and business manager. She handled all correspondence with families seeking to adopt, managed the Academy's finances, and maintained the strict daily schedule that governed every aspect of the girls' lives. Her habit was always spotless, her rosary always at her side, and her word was law within the Academy's walls. The people of Salem welcomed St. Catherine's Academy with open arms. Here, finally, was a solution to the growing problem of orphaned children. The Congregationalist ministers praised the work being done there, despite their theological differences with Catholicism. After all, these women were caring for children that the Protestant community had struggled to accommodate. The mayor of Salem himself attended the Academy's dedication ceremony in September 1834, praising Mother Superior Whitman's Christian charity and maternal devotion. The girls who arrived at St. Catherine's came from across New England. There was Mary O'Brien, 13 years old, whose parents had died in a factory fire in Lowell. Sarah Thompson, 15, had been orphaned when consumption claimed her entire family in a tenement building in Boston. Little Catherine Murphy, no relation to Sister Agnes, was only 12 when her father died in a railroad accident, and her destitute mother could no longer care for her. Each girl who arrived was given the same welcome: a hot meal, a clean bed, and the promise of a better future. They were told they would receive an education that would prepare them to be teachers, governesses, or wives to respectable men. Most importantly, they were told that when they reached 18, the sisters would help them find placement with fine Christian families who would provide them with opportunities they never could have imagined. The daily routine at St. Catherine's was rigorous, but not unusual for the time. The girls rose before dawn for morning prayers, attended classes in reading, writing, arithmetic, and domestic skills throughout the day, and ended each evening with devotional study. They wore simple, gray dresses and white aprons, their hair pulled back in modest styles. They learned to embroider, to manage a household, to cook simple meals, and to conduct themselves as proper Christian ladies. From the outside, St. Catherine's Academy appeared to be everything it claimed to be. The few visitors who were allowed inside saw well-behaved girls engaged in their studies, clean dormitories with simple but adequate furnishings, and devoted religious women who had sacrificed worldly pleasures to serve God's children. When local ministers or government officials visited, they saw exactly what Mother Superior Whitman wanted them to see. But there were things that visitors didn't see. They didn't see the third floor of the building, which was always kept locked and was explained as storage for seasonal items. They didn't see the basement workshop where, according to Mother Superior Whitman, the girls learned advanced domestic skills, a workshop that was always empty when visitors were present. They didn't notice that while new girls regularly arrived at the academy, none of the long-time residents seemed to be aging out of the program. Most importantly, they didn't question why, in 17 years of operation, not a single girl who had been placed with a Christian family had ever written to friends still at the academy, or returned for a visit, or been seen anywhere in Massachusetts again. The first sign that something was terribly wrong at St. Catherine's Academy came not from within its walls, but from a completely unexpected source. A young woman named Emma Prescott, who worked as a seamstress in Boston's North End. It was a cold February morning in 1843, nearly 9 years after the Academy's founding, when Emma was walking to work through the narrow streets near the harbor. As she passed an alley between two brick tenements, she heard something that stopped her in her tracks. A young voice singing a lullaby that she recognized immediately. It was a song that her friend Mary O'Brien used to sing at the textile mill, where they had both worked before Mary's parents died in the fire. Emma followed the sound to a small window on the second floor of a building that she knew, by its reputation, to be one of Boston's most notorious brothels. The window was covered with heavy curtains, but through a small gap, she caught a glimpse of a young woman with dark hair and familiar features. Even after 3 years, Emma was certain she was looking at Mary O'Brien, the same Mary O'Brien, who was supposed to be living happily with a Christian family somewhere in Massachusetts. What Emma saw in that brief moment would haunt her forever. Mary, if it was indeed Mary, appeared to be wearing a silk dress that was far too sophisticated for a girl of 16. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate style that seemed completely at odds with the modest orphan girl Emma remembered. But it was Mary's eyes that disturbed Emma most. They held a hollow, distant expression that spoke of experiences no child should ever endure. Emma stood frozen in that alley for several minutes, trying to convince herself that she had been mistaken. But the lullaby continued, and the voice was unmistakably Mary's. When Emma finally gathered the courage to approach the building's front door, she was met by a large man who made it clear that respectable young ladies had no business in that part of town. That evening, Emma wrote a letter to St. Catherine's Academy, addressing it to Mary O'Brien and asking about her friend's welfare. She mentioned that she thought she had seen Mary in Boston and wondered if she might be visiting the city. Emma expected a prompt reply explaining that Mary was well and happy with her adoptive family, perhaps even including a letter from Mary herself. Instead, Emma received a response that chilled her to the bone. Sister Agnes Murphy wrote back within a week, but her letter raised more questions than it answered. She thanked Emma for her concern, but explained that Mary O'Brien had been placed with a devout family in western Massachusetts more than 2 years earlier. The family, she wrote, had specifically requested privacy and did not wish